All right. So I would like to welcome our guest to the show today, Miss Bailey Ruskus, known to her many fans out there as Chef Bai. Hello,
Hi.
hello. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I am good. So I have a special connection to Chef Bai, and that is that she is my daughter, not only my daughter, but one of my favorite people on the planet. And she is an amazing chef and entrepreneur. And as a lifelong entrepreneur, nothing gives a mother more pride than watching her daughter to grow up to be probably even a better one than her mother.
It was the only way.
Yeah. So I want to get us rolling today with a question right out of the hat here. So you left home at 18 and you were bound and determined to pursue your love of cooking at the Cordon Bleu in San Francisco. And how has your life changed from what you envisioned it would be those 12, I don't know if you want to think of them as 12 long years ago or 12 short years ago?
It feels like multiple lifetimes ago at this point. I don't know. I don't know what I imagined my life to be. I just wanted it to be not in Colorado.
Wow,
Honestly.
mother cries or mother
I
cries.
just wanted it to be different. I feel like when you grow up in a small town like I grew up in, you really only see things from like that perspective. And I think like going to LA every summer, every spring break to go visit grandma, I just like wanted something like that. I wanted something bigger. I wanted
In Southern California, let's be clear,
yeah.
right?
I
Yeah.
wanted like palm trees. I always wanted to when I moved to San Francisco, I didn't necessarily think that it was going to be the end game for me. I just knew it was California and I knew it was an opportunity and I got approved for a massive amount of loans, which at the time I didn't really like think anything of. I was like, sure, whatever. $120,000, let's go.
Bring it on.
I
Yeah.
just saw it as like a ticket, a ticket to where I was going. So I don't know if I really, it's an interesting question because I don't know if I really envisioned it. I still have a hard time with that. I know you love to ask the question, like, where do you see yourself 5 years from now? Or, you have all these big
Cool.
questions, but I don't know. I still don't even think I know, I think a lot of times we have an idea of what we want things to look like. For instance, like I really idolized like the celebrity chef when I was younger. But like the idea of being a celebrity just sounds awful now, like the bigger I get into like influencer life and, the more comments I get online, and like, the more eyes you have on you, the more you realize that like being well known is actually holds a lot of responsibility. And there's always going to be a lot of people that don't like you. So I think, I always like to be liked. I had a bullying issue in high school, so it's very hard for me to feel like people have a problem with me or that I'm ruffling feathers or whatever. So yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know what life was supposed to look like. I think for me, what I always tell people is it's more of like a feeling. Like I wanted to feel happy and successful and like just have this feeling of like, oh, okay, like we made it, like we got this. And I feel like I'm really there now, which even a couple years ago, if you would have told me that I'd be feeling this feeling now, I don't know if I would have believed you that it would be happening yet. So yeah, I don't know if I even answered the question at all, but that's
Well, no,
the answer.
and I also think as it happens with age,
Yeah.
the older we get, the more confidence we get,
Yeah.
more, and I think that's what you're talking to too, is the confidence piece that
Yeah.
now you don't care
Well,
as
you
much.
see the world more, you also see the world more clearly. Like, I think
Mhm.
when you're younger, you're very naive, you're very bothered by very specific things, you're very invincible, very focused, not focused, whatever it is for you. And I think now I just see the world so much more clearly. And I see, even when I first went vegan, I was like, I want the whole world to go vegan. And now I'm like, that's literally never going to happen. How can I make micro changes every day within myself and the people around me to make a better world? Like I think the older you get, yeah, you just have more perspective. You see the world more clearly. You're more confident. You give less of a fuck, sorry, it's cussing, about what other people think. And you're just going for it, And I think when you're younger, you're going for it in an entirely different way. But
And with that thought, what bright, shiny objects do you think tripped you up, like kind of took you off course, that you want to talk about to the world at large?
Sure. I mean, like I was a big party girl. So I like a big bright shiny object for me was like partying and like festivals and having the most fun. Like I had big FOMO, big fear of missing out. Like I remember I was just visiting with my friend, my old roommate in San Francisco this week. And she was talking about how like there was this one time that she and my other roommate went to Miami and I couldn't go because I was too broke. I was like living solely off of financial aid and like food from culinary school. And so they went to Miami and I was like so upset that I didn't get to go, and it like caused a big problem in our friendship. And like, it was just, I look back, it's so ridiculous. But yeah, like a big, bright, shining object for me that was super distracting was being social and partying and like going to festivals, and like Burning Man was like one of the biggest bright shiny objects in my 20s because like all my friends were going, all my friends were DJs, owned clubs in this city. And I went to Burning Man, and afterwards I was like, oh my God, like I don't know how to re-enter life now. And now the idea of going back to Burning Man, I'm like, whoo, it feels like a lot. So
Yeah.
I would say like that was like one of the biggest ones that took me off track. Yeah.
Okay. Too much fun.
So much fun. Yeah.
And what were the bright, shiny objects that you didn't see coming that transformed your life?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think so. My initial move there's a bunch of them, I would say, like, it's from the very beginning when I was in culinary school. One of my advisors, she was actually one of the only women who worked on the team at my culinary school. And I had like a big problem with sexism in culinary school. So I didn't really feel like I had a lot of people to lean on. Like the head chef really,
right.
yeah, like the head chef and I didn't get along. I was very vocal about what was wrong with like what was going on. So he didn't like me. And like,
that is one trait you did get from your mother.
Yes. Yeah. And my father too.
And your father too.
Yeah. And like, so I was just very vocal. And so I had one female advisor, and I kind of broke down to her this one day and I was like, I just don't see myself fitting into this chef culture. Like there's sexual harassment. There's just not a lot of opportunities for women in this field. And I just like, don't really know why I'm here. I was like, I love cooking. I love just like being connected to food and like everything that comes about that. But it feels as though restaurant life has nothing to do with why I love food. It kind of takes all of the fun and nourishment from it, and it turns it into this like really aggressive hustle grind that like I just didn't like. So she was like, well, have you ever thought of being a private chef? And I was like, no, I hadn't. That sounds kind of awesome. She's like, I actually,
because just to be clear, that everything was focused towards the restaurant industry.
Right. It was like they were grooming people to become line cooks, sous chefs, and then eventually executive chefs of their own restaurants. That was essentially the whole point of the school. And she was like, I have this couple who lives in the penthouse of the Millennium Tower, and they're looking for a private chef, and they wanted to get someone from school to have it, just to see if it would work for them. So she set me up with them, and I ended up having a consult with them, and they hired me. And it was something that I was like, I remember like going up to their penthouse the first time. And I was still so young. I was 19 and I was like, whoa, like, this is crazy. Like, I don't belong up here. Like, this is wild. It kind of just like blew open the possibilities for me, and being like, wow, because I had only been in culinary school for a year. So I was still like very fresh to just like the world in general, but also to the cooking scene. And they were super nice. I like still to this day don't even remember their names, but I cooked for them for about a year. They were so great. And I remember the first time I ever cooked for them, I like set a salmon on fire.
I was just thinking about that story.
And while the salmon was on fire, I was like blending something and forgot to put the lid on. And they had these super like high ceilings. And I turned the blender on, and there was just like stuff all over the ceiling. Oh my God. It was like so ridiculous. They came home. I was crying. Their kitchen was a disaster. I was like, I'm so sorry. This is like the first time I've ever done this. I'm so nervous. Like what they did is because they came home with like a gift for me as like a welcome to the family. It was like this beautiful $1,000 trench coat. And it was like this welcome to the family gift. And they were like, oh, honey, like, it's okay. We're just going to go out to dinner. Like, here's your gift. Go home with our driver. They had this like black car. And it was something super nice. Like it was a Porsche or something like that. This driver driving this black car. They're like, go home with our driver. We'll give you a ride. They still paid me. And they were like, we'll see you in a couple days. And they were just like unfazed. I mean, they knew I was a student. So I think, and they weren't paying me like that much, like now that I think about it. But I was just like very like taken back by their kindness and the fact that they were, because I feel like a lot of people would be like, you're out,
Right. And what's interesting is how that might have changed the trajectory of where you were headed, because
Right.
you felt defeated immediately. And
Exactly.
I think where people's kindness really makes a difference in our lives.
Totally. And if it was like a chef, if I had done that at a restaurant, I would have been fired, So it was like that kind of made private chefing a big, bright, shiny object for me, because I realized that like I could really do it on my own terms. And it was more at arm's reach for me. Like I didn't have to go, slave away as a line cook and then a sous chef and then, become an executive chef in 20 years. Like I could be my own boss right now. So that was like kind of the beginning of my like journey working for myself. And I did that for a while in San Francisco, and it was really great because I was able to just find new clients and like have different perspectives and eventually do dinner parties and stuff like that. And I just became better and better and better the more that I put myself in those situations. And that was like great for me. And it kind of like started the whole trajectory of where I am now. And really just like being willing to be uncomfortable in the idea that like you're not always going to be ready for what's next, but you just have to do it anyway.
Well, and it makes me think about champions, right? Like you talked about the woman who helped you at the school that really helped you to shift. Were there other champions along the way, and both positive and negative, that helped guide your journey as well?
Let me think. I mean, I had a lot of like interesting scenarios. I don't know if like negative is the right term. I've just had a lot of like really interesting people I've worked with or worked for. Like I worked for an NFL player last year, and like he was just like so horrible that like that kind of reminded me that I don't want to be working for athletes anymore. Like I was just like, oh, this is so bad. Like no amount of money is going to make this. And of course, not every situation is necessarily like that, but I don't know. Like I think.
And was it because you didn't feel appreciated? What was the negativity piece of it?
I mean, I'm not going to say his name, obviously, but like we went into his house and his house was trashed. Like it was disgusting. And, there's a fine line between like private chef and housekeeper. And through the course of my career, like there have been a handful of people that treat me like house help. And that's something I hate. Like I'm a chef, I'm professionally trained. I've worked with some really amazing people, and like, don't treat me like, and like, honestly, housekeepers also shouldn't be treated like just house help either. You know what I mean? It's like respecting people for what they're great at. And yeah, basically his place was just trash. And it was just the whole situation. I mean, he was nice-ish, but like he just did not have his place set up for us. We had to clean for 6 hours just to make the kitchen cookable. He then disputed the payment after, we had been there for 2.5 days. The whole thing was just ridiculous. So, but that was something that like, even though we did end up getting paid and it was great, we ended up buying our golf cart with the money that we made from that. But that was like a really strong reminder to me, because I had been teetering on the edge of like just going towards cookbook authoring and content creation and doing the more digital kind of like working for myself aspect of it versus private chefing. And that kind of was like the nail in the coffin of like, I don't want to be doing this anymore, because I have been private chefing for 12 years. And so I think I'm kind of just like over that phase. Like I still love my clients. And then on the positive side of it, I've had 2 clients specifically that I can remember, at least in my private chef life, that have just been like such a good support system for me. Specifically, the client that I have here now, I've been working for her for 6 years. She was my first client here in San Diego, and she's just like championed me through everything. She bought like a case of my books when they came out. She's my sounding board. She's super successful. So I love talking to her about stuff, and they're like my family now, so And I
Right.
know no matter what I do, they'll support, me and Steve and stuff. So yeah, I just think, everyone you meet is going to help you decide where you're going, whether they drive you crazy or whether they help you. So
Well, and it brings up the whole idea around boundaries, right?
mhm.
And what boundaries do you put up? I know that when you first came to San Diego and the cooking school incident there.
I was going to bring that up actually, because that was like a huge, so I met this guy at this retreat that we had both gone to that I had cooked at. And him and his wife wanted, or was he a friend of someone from the
He was a
retreat?
friend of somebody's.
Okay.
Right,
So
right.
he and his wife had cancer and she was also a chef, and they were an older couple, and they had reached out to me and were like, hey, like we want to open a cooking school for people with autoimmune disease and cancer. We have a space. We're a catering company now. We want to change our business. We need someone to kind of create the recipes and the curriculum and like kind of help us with the social media aspect. So they were going to essentially give me half the company in sweat equity, essentially. And I was going to get paid half, I guess, of everything that we were making. And so I ended up moving to San Diego. It's so ridiculous because it's why I'm here. And I was there for 2 weeks, working in the kitchen for 2 weeks. And the wife thought that I was like hitting on her husband and got like very insecure and super weird. And I like, trust me, like I was not like, no,
No way.
absolutely. There's no way that I was hitting on this man. Okay. Like if only if only you knew. There was just no way. And even if he was like Brad Pitt, I still wouldn't have, because,
Right. It's not who you are. Yeah.
it's not who I am. And plus, like when it's business for me, it's business. I'm very like focused in that way. But anyway, I digress. This happened. And so we were about to sign the contract, which I learned a big lesson, always read the fine print and sign the contracts before you move your entire life across the country. So, we went to sign the contract and they had changed the contract and the fact that I have 0% equity and they were going to pay me minimum wage. And I was so pissed, especially after working for 2 weeks with them and like essentially working for free, because we were trying to figure out like how we were going to change the kitchen space and like everything that we were going to do. And so I found myself in San Diego, had followed this bright, shiny object with no job, no money, no place to live. My boyfriend and I at the time, actually, I found out he was cheating on me, who was living
was
closer
a lovely time in your
to
life.
San Diego. He was a big, bright, shiny object. I literally
Right.
followed him around for 3 years. I was like, sure, wherever you want me to go, I'll follow you, like little, so then him and I broke up and I was just devastated. I was living on my friend's floor. I was like, oh my God, talk about like following the wrong things. But sometimes you have to follow the quote unquote wrong things in order to find what's right for you, because I would have never met my husband. I would have never I mean, all of those things put me in the path of where I am now. And I mean, without it, who knows what I would be doing.
Well, and I think it stands true for how some people hold themselves back because they're afraid of failure. Now, you could have looked at that as a failure, and perhaps in the moment you did, but
Oh, I was devastated. Yeah.
but you kept moving, and it was a life. Napoleon Hill called it turning points in your life. That
Yeah.
when you face a failure, it's really a turning point, and that took you on your journey where you were destined to go.
And it's really just about like putting one foot in front of the other. I think a lot of times, like, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, which is why I don't like to answer those, what are your big goals or what's your 5-year plan? Because a lot of times, like what we think our life is going to look like 5 years from now, like it's not going to look like that. There's so many things that happen in between. And what I really like to do is do things today that my future self is going to thank me for. So whether that be your finances, whether that be, being kind to your partner or going on a mile-long walk or like eating things that are nourishing to your body. Like it doesn't have to be like these massive steps all the time, but it can just be little things every single day. And like over the course of 5 years, it's going to lead up to this massive picture that you could have never imagined, that really just is made up of these tiny steps, And I think a lot of times we do put too much pressure on ourselves. We read all these like motivational self-help books, or we compare ourselves to people on the internet, or, you know, there's so much like comparison that's happening, or pressure or whatever. And it's like, I think we just have to take it one day at a time and see what happens, because that's essentially what I've been doing, and it's been working pretty well for me. So,
Well, and I'm a big one for goals. And the reason that I like a goal, and I will say that as someone who was recently diagnosed with ADHD, which, no surprise to anybody, including myself, is that it's that focus point. Like, I want to, with my clients, I'll say that magic number, the magic number you want to get to on a financial perspective, and it's the steps to take you there. So
yeah.
I think that it's good in that way, but it's the detailed, I want to make $1 million a year, or I want to, like, something so lofty that if it doesn't happen, you just get discouraged and you walk away. And yeah.
I also think too, like, what I've really been noticing is I do sometimes feel that those big number games are very distracting, bright, shiny objects, and take you away from like why you want to make money, what you want to feel when you make money like that, and like what the point is. Because I think a lot of times, like, I just did a course launch and I was like, oh my God, we're going to make all this money, and like, we're going to sell this many. And it's like numbers, numbers, numbers.
Because you were hyped up to believe that, right?
Also, that's what we talk about. We're like, big goals, big audacious goal. And like, I feel like it's easy to get lost in that and really lose the purpose of like why you're launching the course, and like the fact that it's okay to have a slow roll too. Like over the course of the last couple months, we've had a lot of people enroll and it's been really great. But like our launch week was a flop, and I was so disappointed after our launch week and thinking like, oh, we're going to make this much money. And I think a lot of times when you have these specific numbers, it can also discourage you and can be such a distracting goal or distracting bright, shiny object, where now I like to focus on consistency. I said this in an Instagram post, but like my biggest goal right now is being consistent every single day with myself.
It's
and
huge.
I think it's super important, especially with posting content, especially with, walking or eating healthy or like drinking water. Like, I'm just trying to be as consistent as possible so that every day I wake up knowing yesterday I did my absolute best, and I'm going to do the same again. And of course we all have off days, and like sometimes I'm like, screw it, I'm just going to like go have brunch and call it a day. Yeah. But like 90% of the time I'm trying to be consistent. And that's actually really helped my own anxiety, because I struggle with a lot with anxiety, and it's helped my own anxiety and my own mental health, and just being like, task at hand. What are we doing today? Like, how do you feel? What's happening? And what I've noticed is that over time, I am reaching those goals, but because those goals aren't on the top of my mind anymore, it's more about consistency and how I can make that happen every day.
I couldn't agree with you more. And it's that consistency piece that I see gets dropped to the wayside. And you're talking about, you created what I term as a passion project with this online program that you launched. And so often people will launch something and then it doesn't fall into the rules that the gurus say that it's supposed to do, and they walk away from it completely. But I really loved watching you just go, okay, what can I do differently to get this out there? And it's called the Period Protocol.
The Period Liberation Protocol.
Excuse me, the Period Liberation Protocol.
It's an important word.
And while it has a lot of references to food in it, so this really was a bright, shiny object, an important factor for you. What was it about it that you knew that you had to do it? And even at that point when the launch didn't go the way that you wanted it to, what pushed you to go, I've got to get this out there?
Well, it's actually so funny, because when I started promoting the program, my audience was like, what? Like periods? What? Like, a lot of like my husband's friends watch my stories, and like, it's just funny because all of a sudden now I'm just talking about menstruating like every day all over the place. And everyone's like, what is going on? So I think that was like a big hurdle that I had to jump over, was that like my content just started really losing engagement, like really, really, really losing engagement. There's also a problem online where you get shadow banned or your content gets flagged if you talk about periods because the patriarchy. So it's a problem where, like, for instance, this is a great example. I recently on TikTok have been expanding like crazy. I just had a post get 1 million views, 30,000 views, 300,000 views. Like, it's just been consistently doing really well. Well, I just posted my first like post about menstrual health since like I've had this great hit. So I would probably say in 20 posts, my first post, which is like, I should be more consistent with it, but I've been like having all this great engagement. So I'm like, I'm just going to keep this. So I post about menstrual health and it gets 1,000 views. Immediately it got shadow banned because I was talking about periods. And it's interesting because the things I find that oh, hang on. Pina, my dog is eating this thing right here. Sorry. Sorry. Good girl. The things that I find that we want to shake up the world the most are sometimes the most taboo to talk about. It's the hardest to break through the barrier, and it makes people the most uncomfortable. And that's what I'm really realizing is like, I was very, you have like a vulnerability hangover, especially when you launch a program and you put your everything into it. You talk a lot about your personal story, especially talking about periods and menstrual health and like all this stuff that most people are very uncomfortable talking about. And it flops. I mean, it didn't necessarily flop, but it didn't like do what I wanted it to do at all. And I had a lot of
didn't get the numbers initially, right? I mean, that was the biggest.
I got no numbers.
Yeah.
There was nothing,
Yeah,
and it was also like a lack of engagement, which was very confusing to me because I was like, what's happening? Like, my audience is so engaged when I talk about periods on my stories, or when I talk about having endometriosis without selling something, I get tons of engagement, like people are like, oh my God, I'm dealing with this. I'm dealing with this. I'm dealing with this. Like, I need help. Please help me. I would love a course. I would love this. And so when I started selling something and really started gearing it towards talking about periods and menstrual health and women's health and the patriarchy and all these things that I'm fighting against every single day, my engagement dropped because the algorithms were no longer showing my content. And I at first took it as like an ego blow. And then I realized like, wow, I'm really shaking things up right now. I'm really talking about something that like this algorithm does not want me to be talking about. And I have to find a way around this. And I have to figure out how I'm going to, because it's easy to sell a course where you're talking about making money, or it's easy to sell a course where you're talking about, losing weight.
I was just going to say, even losing weight.
Losing weight. It's an easy grab, and the algorithm loves to talk about diet culture. The algorithm loves to make women feel like they're too fat. Like, it's literally a thing. So when we're talking about making women more powerful and healing from something that the patriarchy and the medical system wants women to stay stuck in and sick in, it's really going to take a lot more than just a couple Instagram posts and one email sequence to really get the word out and to push through this barrier that we have. And so that's what I'm realizing, like, my big goal is to push through this barrier and to really fight the patriarchy in a very consistent, long form way, where the content is not about my ego and how much engagement I'm getting. It's about who I'm reaching and how I can reach the people more. So I've noticed that when I have captions on, if I spell period wrong, or I put like an exclamation point over the I, or I confuse the algorithm so they doesn't know I'm talking about periods, it gets pushed a lot further.
Wow.
Which I find to be really interesting. So I don't even remember what your original question was, but
well, it goes back to that bright, shiny object, and that you weren't deterred. Like, you knew in your heart, in your gut, your soul, whatever you want to call it, that you had to keep pushing through for this. Not just because of all the hours that you put in creating the program, but because of the women that you wanted to reach. And I think that that's the important part, and the beauty, like, where there's some things like, okay, let's go back to the cooking school. You knew, boom, I'm out of here. This is not worth my time. Where this is a passion project, I like to call it, and it really is important to you. And I know that you've gotten some incredible messages from women whose lives you have changed because of what you shared with them.
Yeah, I mean, it's also thinking about Okay. Yeah. It's like your life's work too. You know, it's like, it's easy to look at it as like this one program or like this year's revenue goal. But instead of looking at it as like, this is just part of the whole thing that I'm going to be doing for a long time, I think it also puts takes the pressure off. And yeah, like I had a woman say that, you know, she's been dealing with PCOS for 10 years. She hasn't had her period.
Say what that is.
Polycystic ovarian syndrome.
Okay.
That's what PCOS is. 1 in 10 women or people who experience periods deal with PCOS, which is such a bummer. There's so many symptoms that can come with it, like losing your period. It's like an insulin resistance problem as well. Like it's just, there's so many issues that come with PCOS. You can have endometriosis and PCOS, infertility comes with it. And so I had a woman who says she's lost her period for 10 years. She's tried everything, raw veganism, a super perfect vegan diet, super this, super that, whatever. And so she took my free class on cycle syncing and then started taking the course. And within 1 month, she got her period back after 10 years. 1 month. Like, and she had just done the tip of the iceberg of what we were teaching inside the protocol. So it's pretty amazing, like the change that can happen. And sometimes it doesn't happen that quickly. You know, sometimes it can take 6 months, a year. I talk about that in the protocol. Like, it's not always like an overnight thing for you. It could be like, you know, it can take a long time sometimes, depending on like if you're living in a moldy house or you have a chronically stressful job or, you know, depending on what you have, if you have celiac disease, like everyone has different stuff going on. So it can take a lot longer to heal or
Squeak toy.
no, my dog's hitting her buttons.
Oh, it's hitting the
She has these buttons, but she just hit the go for a walk button. So we know what she wants.
But she
sorry. So yeah, like it can take a long time and everyone is so different. And I think that's a good message too when it comes to like entrepreneurship and like having a business is that like everybody's different. Everyone's on a different path. Everyone has different opportunities and different privileges. And like, it's hard to compare yourself to someone else. It's hard to look at even someone else's like this testimony of like, oh my God, she has PCOS. She didn't have her period for 10 years and she got her period right away. Like you could also look at that and then have this expectation that like you take the protocol and you're going to get your period in a month. And like, it could not happen, you know, because we all live in a different place. We're eating different food that has different chemicals. We're all drinking different tap water. Like there's so many things which I talk about in the protocol that make it so different for everyone. And unfortunately in the United States, like we're living in an incredibly toxic environment and it's learning how to detox. I mean, cancer rates are higher than ever. Heart disease is higher than ever. You know, ADHD is higher than ever. Autism is higher than ever. Brain cancer in kids is higher than ever. Like, why is this happening? You know, like it's because we're living in a toxic world where our food is toxic. Our water is polluted. Our water is toxic. Like everyone is just pumped up with pharmaceuticals. The food we're eating is pumped up with pharmaceuticals. Like it's just insane. Like 60% of all pharmaceuticals go towards dairy cows and animal agriculture. And it's just like, we're literally consuming that. And then the rest of it, you know, of course, we're taking ORAs in our water. So it's like, of course, there's all of this shit that we're constantly consuming and we're living in these toxic environments. And it's like, of course, doing our own work and like figuring out how we can detox our environments. But it's also like, what I'm really looking forward to is putting pressure on corporations and our governments into being like less greedy and not poisoning the population, because that's what's happening right in front of our faces. And a lot of these politicians that we are electing into office are taking money from these corporations that are poisoning us, and they know that they're poisoning us and they don't give a shit. And so, you know, that's going to be the work right there.
And that's where, like, that's a big lofty thing, right? To get through, that's a big nut to crack.
It's also a very scary nut to crack.
Very, very scary. But by doing these things and making people more aware, and I think that it's important for our listeners to also know that you did have, or you do have, endometriosis. Can I say that? Endometriosis.
Endometriosis, yeah.
And that you couldn't find the answers that you needed, so you had to start searching. So I think that that's an important piece of this. And sometimes with the bright shiny object of like, it's something that that we know that we need to put out there in the world.
Yeah.
Because
And sometimes I find like our biggest struggles can become like our purpose and like why we're here and like what the point is. And like, you know, you really think about how many people are chronically sick with something. Like it's insane. Like you have arthritis, dad has high blood pressure, I have endometriosis, you know, like, and anxiety, chronic anxiety, like everyone's dealing with shit. I mean, except Steve. Steve is like this, like
Bailey's husband.
the guy like never gets sick. He got COVID. And when he got COVID and actually got sick from it, I was like, oh, thank God. Like you're normal.
You are human.
Yeah. Like he's like the anomaly.
And you know, and it's even this podcast changing and getting into this whole bright shiny object. When I was last spring formally diagnosed with the inattentive ADHD, it was really like, I want to look into this more. I want to see what's going on, and you know, this whole idea of bright shiny objects, because I see it all the time with my entrepreneurial clients and myself, right? Like I'm a bright shiny object person too. So
your whole world is bright shiny object. You're like squirrel.
I've got all these bright shiny balls in there. It is, oh my gosh. You also wrote an Amazon best-selling cookbook, Cook, Heal, Go Vegan. And what were your biggest surprises in writing the book and gaining the acclaim that you got in doing so?
Interesting question. I mean, the whole book writing process like really changed me and like pushed me in like a really interesting way. Like it really challenged my ego and my patience. And also like I'm a very last minute person. So I, you know, would do homework on the way to school. And I mean, like I was a solid D student because of this, because I just was like, I'm not going to do that.
It wasn't until high school. It wasn't until high school.
Yeah, but you know, I'm like in, you know, high school is like, you know, when you're actually a person, I feel like it's easy to get straight A's in middle school. But I would say like, you know, I'm always like such a last minute person. I think that's why I like thrive working in kitchens, because like, you know, I can make a prep list and do that, but like I can just like get shit done super quickly. And which is why I'm like not great at like house chores, things like that, because I just don't see the urgency in any of it, you know? And so the cookbook for me was like, they only gave me 3 months to write it, which is like absurd now that I'm, you know, talking about writing a second one, spoiler alert. And now they're like, oh yeah, you need at least 8 months to write it, like this much time to edit. I'm like, what? Like this is industry standard, you know, I only had 3 months.
Right,
like,
right.
And you know, when I wrote the book, it was my first year of marriage. So we had gotten married and like had a month of being married. My brother also moved in with us, and they were also doing construction on our house in the middle of summer, and we don't have air conditioning. So like we were,
and let's just mention there was a thing called COVID going on.
It was the middle of COVID also. So it was like, my brother was living with us, which had its struggles. We were freshly married. Our house was literally shaking because they were ripping the stucco off, ripping the deck down. Like it was a nightmare. And we were sweating. Like it was hot, you know? And it was just, we live in a small apartment, like for 3 people and a dog, and everyone's working from home. It was kind of like a little bit too much. It really pushed the limits on like my marriage. Like it pushed the limits on pretty much everything. And so it really just kind of like just pushed me in every way possible. And then once I kind of wrote the book and we were editing and like everything was good to go, it was 2021, which was when the biggest issues for distribution for publishers started happening. And they're still happening. It's actually still like a massive problem. And so my book was just getting pushed out like months and months and months and months. And eventually our books got lost on a shipping container on a ship in the middle of the ocean. And so no one knew where my books were. We had a sold out launch party. Like it was just like so panicked. And we were just like, okay, like, I guess we're just gonna, if no one gets their books, like we're still gonna have the party, but like, I don't know what we're gonna do or like what's gonna happen. But you know, I think what it really just taught myself is like how really resilient I am and how I just was like, whatever, we're just going to keep doing it. And when you're writing a book too, what you really have to call in every favor, like ever. You have to put yourself out there, reach out to celebrities, reach out to your idols, reach out to everyone and be like, hi, I'm writing a book. Please help me sell this book, because it's how the books get sold. And it's, a very humbling experience, really being like, hey, like whatever you can do for me, I promise I'll return the favor. Like, and that was a lot for me to really be like putting myself out there. I remember feeling so physically sick the 2 weeks before the book came out, because I was just like, what if people hate it? Like, what if it gets lost at sea? Like, there were so many what ifs, and
Well, and I do believe that I was just involved in a class a couple days ago about, like we always think that the hardest part is writing the book, which it is a challenge. And so many people, the statistics of how many people who start to write a book and actually finish it are pretty astounding. But that's not the hardest part. The hardest part is then getting it out into the world.
Honestly, it's literally like writing the book is the easiest part of writing the book. Because, it's hard to sell the book. It's hard to edit the book because you have so many different people's opinions on what the book should look like. I thought, like, when I submitted the manuscript, I was like, oh, I did it. It's done. Pop champagne. Woohoo. We got this. Like, we're done. And then like 9 rounds of edits later, I'm like laying on the ground, like, oh my God, like that was so brutal. Cause the whole book gets torn apart, put back together like 9 times over, so what you think the book is going to be is not what the book is once it's finished. And I think that's good. It's good to have other people's opinions on it. It's good to see what editors have to say and, how it's going to fit graphically and like all those things. I think that's, super important. And honestly, like the first 2 weeks of my book launch, like the book did not do what I wanted it to do. I had a very small audience too. And, publishing now is very much like weighted on the author and the author's audience. And it didn't do what I wanted to do. In week 3, I was like, fuck this, I'm getting on TikTok. And I got on TikTok, had one post go viral, and overnight the book became an Amazon bestseller. And so it's why, because I never would have made the New York Times bestseller list the first 2 weeks, because I was just such a small creator on Instagram and that's all I really had. And I was like, I just really need to branch out. I can't depend on one platform for everything, which is like, if you're going to take anything from this podcast, take that. Like, whoever's listening, like, do not depend on just Instagram for your marketing, for your audience, because Instagram can go away in a second. Instagram can glitch in a second. Instagram can ban you in a second. Instagram is very faulty, like, and you can't depend on that app for everything. And that was a big lesson that I learned, that when I went on TikTok and it immediately worked so well, I was like, wow, what the fuck have I been doing? So,
and even with TikTok, I mean, you can get banned, things can happen. And that's where,
but TikTok, it's a lot easier to find new people, I will say. So even if I got banned on TikTok, I really wouldn't flinch. I would just create another account and keep going. Whereas Instagram, it's taken me forever to create
I've heard
audience.
that before. And I felt that before. Yeah.
It takes so long to build up an audience on Instagram, and on TikTok, it's not the same. So, I mean, depending on the content, of course, but yeah. So, I mean, that was like one of the biggest things that I learned, was just like diversifying your content and making sure that you're super well connected, because it's so true what they say, like, it's not what you know, it's who you know. You could be the most talented author in the world, scientist, chef, like whatever. And if you're not well connected and you don't have a following, like, your book's not going to do anything.
The whole piece around your email list too, right? Of keeping connected with people in another way. And I think that's why, and again, that event that I went to, we were talking about that as well, just the importance of email and keeping.
Yeah, totally. And I just started my email list actually back up a couple months ago, and it's been pretty wild. Like, we finally found like a really good system of getting people onto our email list from all of our social channels. And I mean, last week we got 500 new subscribers to our email list in 1 week. That's crazy.
And then that's where that consistency comes in too, right? Keeping engaged. And, one of the things we haven't talked about is how your husband, Steve, has become a part of the business. And and he's really helping in that arena too, on the consistency as well.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, like everything that's happened in the last 2 years. Like, it's wild. Like, he was bartending, 2 years ago, and a little over 2 years ago now. I mean, his last bartending shift was like right before our wedding. So I would say it was like August 2020. And then we were like, fuck this. Like, let's just have you work for the business. Cause I was going to hire an assistant anyway. And I was like, I think that you should just try it out, see what happens. And thank God he did, because he ended up helping me write the whole book. He ended up helping me with like all of our corporate classes, everything. And he's just kind of like slowly been learning. So,
Yeah.
he's taken over the podcast. He's our podcast manager now. He just does like so much around the house too, and like really is like the glue that holds everything together. We joke around, like if Steve, like for instance, like this week, Steve, there was like 2 days where he's like, dude, I'm not doing any dishes or cleaning or like doing anything. Like I'm tapping out for a couple days, and our house was trashed.
I can't even imagine.
It was trashed.
He lived to regret it, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, this morning he was like, fuck, I'm gonna do a quick clean. I was like, okay. But he really is the glue that holds everything together, because I'm just like he calls me a tornado. You guys have been calling me a tornado since I was a kid, but like, it's true. Like, I'm just like, my brain is just like, and I'm always doing things. And like with social media and emailing and everything on my phone, it just makes it 1,000 times worse, because I can be such a multitasker, which is not always a good thing. But he's really just become the glue that's held everything together. And
well, and I think that's the important piece. When you're a person who sees bright, shiny objects a lot,
yeah,
you need that glue. You need that glue to help ground you.
Well, I think a lot of times too, we're very afraid to expand. Like we're afraid to hire an assistant, and we're afraid to like hire help, and we're afraid to do all these things. But like, I was thinking about it, when I had my assistant, so we don't have an assistant right now. When we did have our assistant, we had our highest revenue year ever. And that was because I was able to give things to her that I just either didn't want to do or didn't have time to do. And then I could focus on other things. And I'm thinking about that, saying that out loud. I'm like, I need to hire another assistant, because it's so easy to be like, oh, I want to hang on to that money for myself. Or like, do I really need that? And it's like, yeah, you need it. Like, it's time. You have to outreach. You have to pull people in. Like I have a PR team now, which is like so amazing. I want to hire a management. And I also want to hire an assistant, because the more people that you hire out to do things, the better you can be at the genius that you are. And that's like the biggest lesson that I learned in having Steve working for us, is like, I could delegate things to him so that I could, be negotiating and signing contracts and like doing all the things that I'm really good at, writing the books, so like he can kind of take over and be the genius behind the podcast and do things like that behind the scenes, where it's just too much for one person or even two people to be doing. So yeah, but back to what I was saying in the beginning, like it's amazing what happens in 2 years. And I think it's easy to get really hard on yourself and be like, oh, we're not at this financial goal yet, or, oh, we only have this much saved, or, oh, this, or, oh, that. But when I really look back on like what we've done in 2 years, it's nuts. Like it's literally nuts what we've been able to accomplish. And I just can't wait to see what we do 2 years from now,
Well, and with that, my final question to you is that what is the bright, shiny object that excites you the most in looking towards the future?
I have like a bunch, of course. Well, I'm writing another book, which is exciting. So that we're talking with publishers now, which is a really exciting part of writing another book. And I think just like expanding for us, that's like what excites me the most. Like, we've lived in our apartment for 5 years now. We have 2 dogs now, and we're just like expanding so much. And I just like don't know what our life is going to look like in 2 years, like having another book in 2 years, the book will probably just be coming out, and like, we could be living here, we could not be living here. Like, it's just like, we don't really know. We're expanding, we're saving money, we're trying to figure out what's next. And so I'm just excited for change. I think I'm very scared for change. I love our little bubble that we're in right now, but I'm very excited for that.
Just someone who knows you well, you also thrive on change too.
Yeah, it's true. I'm always like, where am I moving? This is as long as I've ever lived anywhere, except your house,
except here. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been great though. It's been exactly what I needed to have, like a home and to have consistency and stability to really be able to figure out what I'm doing with my life. And so, but yeah, I think the thing I'm the most excited about is the book, because the book creates insane opportunities. And this last book changed my life, changed who I am, showed me that Steve and I are like such a power team working together, introduced me to so many incredible people. And I just know that this next book is going to do that times like 20. It's going to have such insane backing. And I can already tell just the conversations we're having about it, that conversation I'm having about it with my literary agent, like the book is insane. The idea is genius. I can't wait to announce it. Probably won't be like a year till I can announce it, but yeah, it's going to be like the next big thing for us. And it's just really a vessel to take us to what's next.
And the lives that you're going to change in the process.
Well, that's the whole point.
All right, my dear. Well, thank you so much. Much love to you. And thanks for spending this time. And I appreciate so much and what you're giving to the world.
Love you. Sorry, I rambled as usual.
Love you.
Love you.